This is Aubrey Bettencourt, President and CEO of Almond Alliance. This is Almond Alert.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Happy New Year. Man, I love saying Happy New Year. It's the salutation I try to keep as long as I can, partly because it's as much encouragement to me as it is to anybody else, but there's always a freshness and a newness. And man, have we had some freshness and newness already in 2023. Massive amounts of storm activity. What started off as what looking like a very slow start to our winter has accelerated rapidly into what is trending as a normal water year. Now, before we get too far into that, I thought it would be a really good time as we're watching all this activity. And first and foremost, our hearts go out to those that are struggling with flooding or damages. We've even had loss of life already in California because of this series of atmospheric rivers that are moving through the state so rapidly. I thought it'd be a good time for us to get together just shortly and talk about some California Water 101. We're seeing a lot of chatter on social. Totally people are weather geeking on Twitter, myself included. I'll even give you recommendations of some of the apps that I like to watch. And I'm a water geek to begin with, but I thought it was a really good opportunity for us always to get back to basics and understand California Water 101 when we see this activity going on around us. Because it's quick to commentary and quick to quip and quick to criticize at all different levels. And trust me, there is plenty of criticism to go around pretty much everybody in the water world and water user world for the last 25 years when it comes to California and the West. But I wanted to take a chance for our first podcast of the year to go back to Water 101 and basics. But at the top end, I want to just reinforce with everybody, we've seen a lot of water come in, a lot of saturation in the soils after a really dry year when our trees and you see this in the urban center, Sacramento and other places where the root systems just have been tired and dried out over the last year because of drought and consecutive years of dry conditions. And now they're getting saturated and these high winds are blowing stuff over. We lost a fence and had to clear that up at a house not too long ago. So if you are working in an orchard setting, or a tree or vine setting, there's a program that the Farm Service Agency offers called TAP, the Tree Assistance Program, that is specifically to the health of the tree. So if you lose a tree or a series of trees, or you have experience of any loss or damage to the trees in your orchards as a result of these storm activities, please contact your local FSA and ask about the TAP program. That's a standing program available to you that basically helps with the physical tree itself, not yield or anything like that or production loss, but the tree itself. So if you have any damages, please make sure to contact FSA or reach out to us at the Almond Alliance and we'll help you out on that as well. So here we are in what is truly a remarkable year. I got to kind of rub and poke at those who've said, when I kind of called it out earlier this year around November, I said, you know what, this is starting to look like a normal year for hydrology. If you look at the 40-year average on a chart, this is starting to look normal. And everybody said, oh, no, don't say that, because that's what we said last year, and look at what happened. I said, yeah, but this is a little different. As I started watching the radar way out over the Pacific. So one of my favorite apps to look at as a weather geek is called My Radar. I have it, and they also do weather updates. If you're following me on Twitter, you'll see me post some of their videos on there. Great explanations and amazing different radar filters. And different filters on the map so you can watch kind of what do atmospheric rivers look like and what do they do when they come across the Pacific. And so as I started looking way out, even just before Christmas, way out over the Pacific, I said, you know what, I think we've got about 2 atmospheric rivers coming. And I had a bunch of friends tell me I was full of it and I was crazy. And then we all got stuck in Tahoe at New Year's. So that's a perfect example of this amazing cycle that we're in, one atmospheric river after another. And I don't want to get into the weeds of like arguing with experts around some of that. But the reality of it is we are looking at, in our southern Sierras right now, 206% above normal on our snowpack for this date, 183 in our central Sierras, 183% above normal, and 135% above normal in our northern Sierras. Now, let's go 101. When I say above normal, you're going to hear that with regards to snowpack, and you're going to hear that with regards to water, and you're going to hear that with regards to reservoir levels. Above normal meaning some sort of normal, whether we're talking about the normal for this time of year or a percentage of an average. And so when we talk about above normal, we're saying, okay, normal's 100%. And if I'm 183% above normal, that means I'm above normal 183%. So if I'm 200% above normal, I'm double. So we're seeing an extreme amount of precipitation and an extreme amount of snow coming in. Snow is great. We love the snow. It's one thing to have rain. It's another thing to have snow. And why that's important is because that is the ultimate foundational reservoir for the state of California. So Water 101, Rule 1, 2/3 of the state's rain and snow is in the northern third of the state, and 2/3 of the population and economy is in the southern 2/3 of the state. So that dividing line is that San Joaquin, Sacramento Delta area. So basically put your finger on San Francisco and draw a line due east all the way across the state. And that's the heart of the hydrovascular system of the state. So 2/3 of the rain and snow comes from north of that line, and 2/3 of the population and economy comes from south of that line. And really, the natural notice of this goes back to pre-statehood. And the advent of our water supply system in California and the brilliance, and as many have referenced over the years and across history, is the envy of the world, was because it recognized this dynamic and it recognized all that water that naturally wants to push out through that area. And back in the day, that was actually a tidal basin. It sat lower than sea level, and there's writings of high tide coming into Sacramento and Stockton at certain times of year. And so as our state fathers looked at this system and said, you know what, if we could capture rain and snow and control it from flooding us out, and we could channel it to different parts of the state, we could create drought preparedness for cycles of dry period in this Mediterranean climate where we have rain and snow from about October to March, April. And then our dry period in the summertime as part of a Mediterranean climate, which is natural, which is from, March, April through to end of September, where we have our dry period where we don't get rain and snow. Now, in certain parts of the country, you don't get rain for 2 weeks, it's a drought. Texas, southern states, they don't get rain in the summertime for 2-3 weeks, it's a drought for them. For us in the summertime, that's pretty darn normal. And this system is designed to work with that. And the system was designed to harbor and harness that and provide water certainty for 365 days out of the year, to provide flood protection for certain parts of the state, and to provide a foundation to our economy and growth of the state. And really, it's because of our ability to capture that rain and snow to hold us through periods of dry, not only in our summers, but also up to 3 years of drought and dry periods, or below normal periods, that California went from a burgeoning state to one of the largest global economies, the 4th largest global economy, in less than 100 years. Absolutely, I attribute it to that. I dare anyone to challenge me. I'm sure there were a lot of other factors, but I guarantee you it all comes back to delivering water reliably all throughout the state within a matter of years, created the foundation to this incredible and diverse economy for this incredible and unique climate that we have here, and this Mediterranean climate that we have here. So, Rule 1, 2/3 of the rain and snow, northern third of the state, 2/3 of the population and economy, southern 2/3 of the state. And we have become the powerhouse that we are and the wonderful place that we are because of our ability to utilize this natural occurring wet period and harnessing it for in the dry period and protecting ourselves from both flood and drought. And that is what the system of reservoirs and aqueducts and pumps is designed to do. So we are into Rule 2. So Rule 2 is that we have 3 water users that are dependent on that system. So that system of reservoirs and canals and dams is designed for 3 types of water use in modern California. Is 50, 40, 10. That's Rule 2, 50, 40, 10. So all of these reservoirs in this entire system, what we call developed water, this is water that is captured by man, that's snow runoff that's captured by man and delivered by man. That's about 15% of total rain and snow that hits the state. So over, almost 80% or more actually is absorbed throughout nature in its own. It's about 15 to 17% that gets captured in this system. Of that developed water, that 15 to 17%, 50% of it goes to environmental protection. That's water quality and quantity, and timing and distribution for environmental purposes. That could be turbidity for fish species at different times of year. That could be temperature control for fish species at different type of year. That could also be water quality control, salinity, keeping it. Remember I told you high tide used to come into Sacramento. That's controlling what we call the X2 line, which is keeping the salinity barrier in the delta at a certain level. And there has to be so much outflow of fresh water to keep that line there. So that's that 50% for environmental protection. 40% is for agricultural irrigation use. That's water that is actively used to support irrigated agriculture that becomes the food, fiber, and fuel that we all use, that we all consume. It also goes to keeping those trees alive, keeping those vines alive, and supporting our rural economies as well as our food processing economies. And that dollar goes all the way through, as we've talked about before, the economic impact of agriculture in California. So that's at 40%. And then 10% is for municipal and industrial use. And those are our cities and our different industrial uses as well. So at the time when the system was finally constructed, and the last major infrastructure that was done was really about the 70s, the population was 25 million people, so about half of what we have today. And at that time, the system only supported 2 types of water use. According to the state of California, the system was designed, and the federals, because part of the system is federal, part of the system is state. At that time, it was only designed for 2 types. It was municipal, industrial, and agricultural. So it wasn't until 1972 with the signing of the Endangered Species Act, and then in the early 90s, the implementation of the Central Valley Project Improvement Act in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, and a number of other different places around the state, Klamath and other places, where we saw an increase in the portfolio for part of the portfolio for our environmental protection. And so now, fast forward, the system, which was designed for 2 types of water use, now has 3 types of water use. The new user is now the largest user, and the system is trying to support a population almost double its size. So when you hear our directors and our leaders and government officials and commentators all talk about, well, the system is undersized, they're right. It's undersized for modern demand. It's undersized for the modern relationship we have with the resource. And so the infrastructure and the laws that actually order the operations of the infrastructure in a lot of ways are out of date and out of size. So you have a physical infrastructure that's struggling to keep up with new demand, and you have the rules that apply to it that tell you how to operate it that are antiquated and don't acknowledge a lot of the new technologies that we have to measure, monitor, provide real-time information for not only managing species and water quality, but also water supply and flood protection. Some of this is just, it takes a lot of time, because every new change to a manual on a dam or every new change on an operations directive requires a full environmental review at the state and federal level. And that can take up to 6 years each time. So that's when we hear about things called NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. That's a review, an Endangered Species Act review, or biological opinion. Those are done by our Fish and Wildlife and our NOAA fisheries. Those are all things that kind of take us even longer to modernize our system, not only physically, but just in policy. And so in some ways, we have handcuffed the system to try to keep up with the demand that it has. Now, it's arguably, this system could handle itself for 3 years, even with the new water user, if we could just modernize the operations. When I talk about modernizing the operations, it's not just the technology, but even some of those handbooks require you to operate the dam based on a calendar instead of based on real-time conditions. So when we have atmospheric rivers coming through, sometimes the operations has to go get special permitting or special permission because their current orders don't acknowledge the ability for the dam manager or the infrastructure manager to work flexibly with what they see coming, as we have better predictive technology, but the handbook doesn't let us use it, or the policy on the books doesn't let us incorporate that in the decision making for managing the system. So when I look at what's happening today, my commentary on that, not that anybody's asking, but something to keep in mind, is we actually have a system that's part of the solution for flood protection in times like this, and drought resilience and recovery, which we desperately need coming up with 3 years of extreme drought, if we just freed us up to utilize and implement those new technologies, to have better predictability, forecasting, and better real-time operations of our system, so that we can take advantage, move water when and where we need it, while still taking care of species, while still taking care of species in the future, while still protecting for health and human safety throughout the state. And now there's a lot of variability, and we're seeing a lot of other things happen right now on the coast. Some places on the coast suffer from the same problems as the central infrastructure of the Central Valley Project and the state project. And some places don't. They literally are just dealing with a lot of water coming in a short period of time. So that brings me to kind of Rule 3. Rule 3 is a new rule. It's one I haven't had except for the last few years, and that is that a drought is definitely natural, but a water shortage, that can be a decision of man. It's how we operate this system. It has been vilified as part of the problem, and I think in a lot of ways it's actually a part of the solution. That very same system that handled these types of situations past can handle situations future if we are willing to modernize the way we operate it and willing to modernize the way we invest in it. I wish more than anything else that I had new infrastructure tomorrow to take advantage of this amazing gift of these different weather systems that are coming through. And more importantly, this snow that's packing up, that's all going to melt at some point. And it's going to melt into these reservoirs and systems. And we need the freedom and flexibility to move that and put it in places where it can be of use for all water users, environmental, public health, and farms and rural economy. We absolutely need the flexibility to do that. And while I wish I had infrastructure to take advantage of that, and while we've heard that even from our own, that's not happening tomorrow. And so I really encourage you to look into a couple of different technologies that I think could be done tomorrow. In fact, I know they could be done tomorrow. If we're willing to do it, that could give us the flexibility to utilize this system towards solution instead of vilifying it as the problem. One of those is called Forecast-Informed Reservoir Operations, FIRO. It's been piloted in the state in a number of places. If you remember, or you're a geek like me, and you were watching Folsom Reservoir through this last 3-year drought period, you noticed Folsom was always kind of normal, kind of okay, kind of had more water than everybody else. That's because Folsom had had a dam operations manual, basically the guidebook that says, here's how you're going to operate the dam, updated in a way that let them incorporate things like FIRO, that let them utilize real-time conditions for real-time operations, which meant it wasn't just because the calendar said you release water on that day or the calendar said you hold water on that day. The operations of the dam by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation said, no, based on real-time conditions and long-term forecasting and what we're seeing out over the ocean and what we see coming up out of the snow, we're not going to release as much during a dry period or an extended dry period. Or, you know what, we're going to release a little bit now because we see it coming. And so you had that flexibility of operation, which allowed for more sustained water use and more sustainable operations of the reservoir. We definitely need to see that applied across all of our reservoir systems and arm that. Even on the Colorado system, FIRO is an incredible tool that we need to incorporate into our operations of our system everywhere and anywhere we possibly can. I know we're trying to go reservoir by reservoir, but again, when you incorporate FIRO into a dam operation manual, that would be ask number 2, updating our dam operation manuals to utilize these technologies and our infrastructure operations to utilize these technologies. You do have to go through a full environmental review. So anything we could do to streamline that process could also, again, take the handcuffs off, take the shackles off, and let us use this infrastructure in a way that provides long-term water supply sustainability and flood protection for all water users now and into the future. Second thing that I would say, so first is FIRO. Second would be updating our dam operations manuals. Third is aerial or airborne snow observation. We just saw it this week. I love it too. DWR did a great job sending out their guys in the blue jackets with the stick it in the snow, measure how much snow we have, measure the snow water content we have. But we really need to incorporate not just this tried and true method, but we need to incorporate airborne snow technology, which is flying LiDAR over the range, flying other technologies over the range to really measure for more accurate data on how much snow we have and what is the actual snow water content, because the more accurate we are in knowing what we have, the better we are able to manage the system and not end up short or thinking we had more water than we actually did, like we did a few years ago. Certain water districts around the state are actually utilizing this technology. If you go back and listen to our podcast with Michelle Reimer at Turlock Irrigation District, she's utilizing this technology. And in a year where she did and the state didn't, the state was wrong and overestimated their water supply by, I think it was over 57,000 acre feet of water, and Michelle was only off by maybe 7,000 acre feet. So we have an incredible tool, already tried and true. We just need to allow it to be utilized. And last but not least, and this is something that you've heard us talk about groundwater, and I'm going to use some really janky, goofball language for you, and that is conjunctive use. So conjunctive use is the idea. It's what we do on our farm every day. It's looking at how much surface water we have and how much groundwater we have and managing our water use portfolio all together, conjunctively, surface and ground. Unfortunately, we have a lot of legal barriers within the state that don't let us do that in all circumstances. And so there's times where water coming out of a federal reservoir can't be sunk into the ground because then it becomes state water and now you have a legal problem. Or in a flood event, when we could be moving water to places where we can sink it, you have to go get a permit from the state because it doesn't acknowledge active groundwater recharge as a beneficial use of the state's water. So we have outdated policy that needs to be modernized for our modern concerns, such as sustainable groundwater management under SGMA, which passed back in the mid-2000s, early 2015, 2016. So we have gotten in our own way in some ways. And so my ask number 4 would be to find ways to streamline our active groundwater recharge permitting and allow us to take advantage of these times where we do need to create space in the reservoir because we're going to have a lot more water coming in. We're going to have a lot more of that snowmelt coming in. So why not go put that on an aquifer that could sink it, which is another reservoir for us. So just as much as the snow is a backstop reservoir for our water supply, so is our aquifer. And that's something that I think everybody agrees on for time immemorial. So we really do need to update and come up with some creative solutions. I'm really excited to hear that that was actually mentioned in the governor's water strategy for the state earlier this year. Would love to see that pursued even more because that's where we can utilize existing infrastructure like our water districts and our farms, where we can actively recharge the aquifer during these incredible times, utilizing existing or natural infrastructure to do so. This has been done in other parts of the country. I know they do this in Idaho. I know I would love to see us do more of this here. We see it occasionally because special use permits are pulled. But honestly, this should be a practice in the way that we manage our water supply going forward and rethinking the way we see the system, not as part of the solution, or excuse me, not as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. And the same thing goes for our farms. California is over 1 million acres of producing almonds. 50% of those 1 million acres have been identified as prime ground for active aquifer recharge. This is existing infrastructure that we could be utilizing in order to restore our aquifers in times of plenty so that we have them there for times of less, really helping to support our rural water systems, our rural communities, and our long-term water management sustainability. And again, taking the shackles off of good people who know how to do this, taking the shackles off of our own creativity. It's kind of like we need a renaissance from what we had that originally designed the system to do it again for our modern relationship to the resource and our modern needs and our modern challenges and our modern priorities. So that's a lot for 101. I know I laid the groundwork, but I had to because I need us all thinking about this a little bit differently. I think we all need to be thinking about this a little differently. I wish I had new reservoirs today. I wish sites was done today. I wish certain reservoirs were raised today, and we could have that conversation another time, but it's not going to happen today. It's not even going to happen tomorrow. But what can happen today and tomorrow is the way that we manage the system and the way that we operate the system. And I'm telling you right now, we implement those things like FIRO, like airborne snow observation, like updated dam operations manuals, like streamline permitting for active water recharge, and you will hit the trifecta of drought recovery, flood protection, and groundwater sustainability. It's like that old parable that there are diamonds all around us if we're willing to just bend over and pick them up. We have the solutions at our hands and fingertips. It's just about having the will and the drive to go get them. So I hope that was helpful. Again, I wish you all the best. Those of you who are really struggling, I'm now seeing rock slides and mudslides. This isn't ending anytime soon. We've got another system coming in tomorrow, and it looks like another system coming in midweek. In many ways, we are ever thankful. And in many ways, we are challenging ourselves. Again, I used to say what keeps me up at night is what happens when it rains. In times of drought, we should be planning for how to get out and what to do with the water when we get it. And in times that we have the water, we should be thinking about that next drought and protecting ourselves going forward. It's kind of an opposite way of thinking. And it challenges us to think long term in the face of challenges that are happening in real time. Again, if you are dealing with any on-farm loss or community disaster issues, and you have any questions about that, I encourage you to reach out not only to us, we'll help you out, but also your local farm service agency, your local rural development, your county commissioner. And if you're needing any other assistance, please let us know. Please report any damages the moment it happens. That's really important for reporting up to the feds in order to get resources released to the state now that the governor's declared a declaration of disaster. We're actively working on that. We're providing feedback in real time. But your information to us is what allows us to go do that job. So again, please feel free to report and reach out. And you can always find us at almondalliance.org. It's a pleasure to see you in the new year. A wet new year, but we're going to be talking about water a lot more. And if you want to learn more, please visit us, please call us, and we'll see you around.